If you're frustrated in your photography, in my opinion, it's for one main reason. At least in the last couple of years, every time I felt lost or frustrated or upset or uncreative, it's been for the same reason. And it's because I don't know what I want out of my photos. You could go a couple of ways with this, but I think a lot of it has to do with editing. I actually put out the question just a couple of hours ago on the Legends Club, and the question was how much of a photographer's style is determined in the edit, as opposed to the shooting or, the technique or that sort of thing. Every response that I've had so far has been over 80%, and most of them have been over 90%. And I think that's really interesting. I really like the honesty, because I think most people would sort of default to something like 50% shooting and 50% editing. And I think a lot of photographers want to place more emphasis on their own, technique, on their own, their eye and whatever else. And I think that is probably what sets apart the elite. At the highest level, that is, you might be able to look at someone's RAW file or a JPEG straight out of camera and pick their work over another. And particularly if it's someone that you followed for a long time and you're really familiar with. But to be honest, for most of us, for the average Joes, for, the everyday photographer, I don't think you could really pick something that is going to be a standout. If you were looking, let's say, at just a JPEG with the default picture profile applied, to be honest, I think it's going to be hard to tell a lot of people's pictures apart from one another. It's not a diss whatsoever. I just think that technology is so good and camera equipment now is so good that it's, a lot easier to take great shots. Andy Brum mentioned in one of the comments on the Legends Club, which I really liked, a lot of it has to do with gear used. For example, it depends on the situation and depends on the photographer, but someone might default to a certain lens or a certain look or a certain, a certain set of gear that might become their style. That is something that puts them apart because it's something that gives you a very specific look. And I totally agree with that. And I just tend to agree with Andy in general. In my opinion, it's somewhere around 80% of someone's style is the edit. And when I say the edit, that could also be like just the feel of the photos, like not necessarily saying that they use the same preset, let's say, or they're going for the same look. It could be film as well. It could be the Fujifilm recipe in your camera. It's just the way, the colors, the processing of your image, not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily just mean the edit, but I think that is a big part of it. So I think what this all boils down to is that the best photographers and the best way to love your photography and, feel that spark and that love and that passion for it is to know, going into a shoot and going into taking a photo, to know what you want the end product to look like, or to be already able to visualize the end product while you're taking a photo. It's a lot harder said than done. But there's a couple of ways that I think that you can do this and make it a lot easier on yourself. And I'm going to go through those in this video. So basically, if you are just shooting pictures all the time and then just figuring out after the fact, you get this big, let's say you get 500 shots, 1,000 shots from a shoot or a wedding or an event or something. If you've just got all those shots and then at the end, you have to just figure out how you want them to look. In my opinion, it's going to be a lot more frustrating and it's going to feel a lot less intentional to someone looking on, from the outside looking in to your images, because it's what's the phrase? You're shooting the arrow and then painting the bullseye around it. In some situations it works, and probably in many situations you would never know. But I think, when I look at someone like Kurt compared to a lot of other photographers that have been shooting for the same amount of time, let's say, I think Kurt has a big, what he's always had going for him is he's always, at least from the outside looking in, he's always seemed very deliberate and very intentional and like he knew what he wants to do with his edits. if you want to check out Kurt's work, it's at Kurtogram on Instagram. And yeah, I think he really hits the nail on the head here, because you really want the viewer to look at a picture and think that this photographer meant to take this shot. This photographer clicked the button at this time intending for the photo to turn out the way it has, like this, which we're not all doing, or we're not all, I don't want to say capable, but we're not all good enough to always do. And maybe, Kurt, if you want to weigh in on this in the comments, maybe you don't always know how it's going to look, and maybe you are figuring it out sometimes, but at least I do see consistency in your shots. And I think consistency is a lot to do with style. I think, familiarity with someone's work and noticing the patterns and the repeated, replicable aspects of their photography, even across different shots, different genres. I think that is what is going to define your style more than anything. I think that's really important. I can't overstate that, because if someone is looking at your work and someone wants to hire you, or someone wants to, get you in to take shots or make a video or whatever, they're hiring you based on, more often than not, a set of images that they've seen of yours already, whether it's your portfolio or your Instagram, or, something that you've done for another company or person or band or artist or whatever. They're hiring you because they see something that they like in your work, in your shots, and they want you to apply that to their specific situation. How can they make their product or their business have that same feel as what you created for someone else? Just imagine if you hired someone based on their portfolio, whatever the field. Let's just use photography, even though most photographers are not hiring other photographers. But let's say you hire someone based on their portfolio, and then the images that they give you are nothing like the images of the shots that you booked them for. Same, let's say it's a designer. Let's say you want a logo. Let's say you've seen 5 other photographers that they've designed logos for, and they all have a little bit of a look and feel about them. And that's why you're hiring that person. And then the thing that they give you is nowhere near up to the standard, or nowhere near the look and feel of what they've done for those other photographers. Then that is, that defeats the purpose. That's not why you hired that person. Here are a few things that I've jotted down this afternoon that I think could help to fix this issue. Where possible, if you can, and I understand that not every situation allows for this, but I think it's really important to learn how to shoot tethered and to get into the habit of doing so. I think you're going to learn a hell of a lot that way. This is honestly such a cheat code to photography and, commercial photography. And I think just to, learn and get really good instant feedback really quickly, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because if you don't know what you're doing, then your shots and the flaws in your shots they're going to become apparent really quickly, right? And if you've got a client or a creative director or a, someone looking on set, it's going to be pretty easy to see on a bigger screen on your computer, the flaws in your image. It's going to amplify those. But having said that, if you do have a little bit of an idea, if you have some experience shooting, or you know a little bit ahead of time what you want to get out of the image, even if you don't, you can always, I suppose, just take a shot and make a few tweaks based on what you shoot on the day, which I think is what most people do. But I think if you have a bit of experience shooting that type of shoot, then chances are you'll have a little style or a little preset that you can add to the shots as they come in. And then that way, someone looking on, let's say your client is looking on, and their perception is that the photos that you take just look that good as you take them. And I think that's amazing, because you want to give the perception that it's just that easy for you. Something about what you're doing, something about your process, your gear, your style, whatever. It's just that effortless. Excuse me. You take a photo, it comes through and it looks great. obviously you want to, it's important that the client knows that it's not that simple. It's not just a matter of clicking a button, but hopefully you can demonstrate in the way that you shoot that this is just something that comes along with hiring you. Another really cool and really important thing about shooting tethered is you can make adjustments in real time as you're shooting. So you take a shot and you see something, like I said, up close on a big screen, high quality. You can adjust your light, you can adjust your exposure, and you can actually shoot for the edit, shoot for the way that you want the images to look. And again, that's something that requires a little bit of experience, a little bit of maturity, but it also means that you're going to end up with a better product because rather than having to, like I said, figure it out later, you might have a certain look or a color grade or whatever, and you realize that this sort of edit is going to look better, exposed a bit more or exposed a bit less. Or if you just cut a bit of light from the background or you add some contrast or a little bit of rim light or fill light or something, then it's actually going to make that look better. That's something that you just can't really do from the back of the camera because, first of all, the quality is not that good looking on the back of the camera. Secondly, you don't get to add those settings and presets and looks. Okay, let's talk about presets a little bit now. It's probably pretty obvious at this stage, but if nothing else, every time you make an effort that you're happy with, just save it as a preset. Talk about cheat codes. Presets are full-on cheat code to photography. I think most good photographers make presets this way and keep their presets this way. Create an edit, you create a treatment on a photo, and every time you make something that you're happy with, just save it as a preset, or if you're shooting in Capture One, as a style. That way you just have this little visual journal, this record of all the things done that have worked in the past. And when you come into a new shoot, you have all of these different options that you can try to, kickstart the feel of that shoot. So let's say you shot a similar sort of product with a similar sort of lighting, and you can go back to an edit that you've done in the past for that product. Start with that. And chances are, in all likelihood, most of the time you're going to need to change the edit a bit. You're going to need to tweak it. You might have to change the white balance or the exposure or the shadows and highlights or something like that. But then what you're actually doing is remixing that original preset and making a new situation where it applies. Honestly, the magic, the really skilled photographers and the really skilled makers of presets can make something that's going to apply across many different images, across many different types of images. And that is the true art of it. That is a very difficult thing to do. But like I said, if you just start to build this library, every time you make something good, make sure you save it. I like to keep them in a sequence, 001, 002, 003, and then I'll have a description afterwards, or, a short, a couple of words that describe where I've used that preset in the past. And that way I can go back to PJ Studio, PJ Black and White Wedding, PJ Natural Light Portrait, PJ Wedding Vibrant, that sort of thing. So you can go back and revisit those. So as time goes on, you'll build up a big oh my God, I don't know if you can hear my son screaming in the background, but it's very distracting. So as time goes on, you'll end up building up this big library, and to be honest, the presets that you end up with will look nothing like the ones that you started with, and that's really cool. But you also might find little elements of each that you like along the way. For example, you might find that you might take a curve that you've made in an edit from an earlier preset, but you might like the skin tones of another, or you might have really nailed the white balance in one, or maybe you went a bit more, hard with the grain of another, and you might combine different elements into one image, and slowly you'll start to find what you like. And again, with time and with experience, you can build a preset that I think is going to work for you across many different situations. It's more difficult than it sounds. I really want to emphasize that point that the more that you do that, the more you're going to close that loop, narrow that circle of how long it takes you to process images, and the more that instinctually you're going to know what to go for each shoot, and the more by default you're going to shoot a picture and already be feeling out the preset or feeling out the look, the way that image is going to end up. That is just so helpful. And, eventually that is what is going to become your style, in my opinion. If you have something contrary, if you think you have a better solution to this, feel free to drop it down below into the mix. I'm very keen to hear other perspectives, but this is my personal lived experience. Something else that I've been thinking a lot about is on the topic of consistency and style. Another way to practice this, I think, is to start working on a series or a couple of different series. And I think that's going to help you in a few different ways. But basically, if you're deliberately thinking about things, photos that you can take over a period of time that are going to end up being viewed together or be intended to be viewed next to each other, then I think you're going to be aiming for consistency, or at least consistent elements among them. And I think, again, consistency is going to be key to developing a style. For example, I did a couple of videos earlier in the year where I went out to shoot old style milk bars, and I shot them on my little Fuji camera, so there wasn't actually any editing required, but, I still had to find a little bit of a style that linked all these shots together. For me, that was just the little, the little edit built into the camera. But I have seen a few photographers recently who've done I can't even tell you the names, but in the genre of street photography, they've done like a few little series. Like one of them was people coming home on the bus in London, shot through the windows, like the misty, condensation windows of a bus, peering in through the bus, and a really interesting series looking through the windows. Another one was advertising reflected off cars at nighttime. I think it was in London. This was the same photographer. If anyone is familiar with these, I would love to revisit them. I can't remember the name of the photographer, but I watched a really great video about it. And if I find it, I'll link it down below. But I can't remember his name for the life of me. But anyway, something to work on, something to keep in the back of your mind. And yeah, I think that's a good, easy way to do it, because by default, if you're shooting images that are similar or that are meant to be viewed together, I think you're going to find consistencies or find a way to shoot them consistently that is going to, if not define your style, it's going to define your style for that moment, for that period of shots in that series. I think that's really cool. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I've been thinking a lot about presets lately because I've actually gone and bought, there's a few YouTubers that I've been watching on and off for the last couple of years. And sometimes you see something that someone does and you really like an edit or a shoot or, a video that they've done, and you see the looks that they have in that video. And it's not necessarily that you want to copy their look or copy that style, but just the fastest way to learn, like talk about cheat codes, the absolute best cheat code I can give, the quickest way to pick elements of someone else's photos that you like, to work out how to implement parts of those into your own, is to look at someone's presets. And, for the cost of $20, $30, $40, $50 to see a set of presets, a set of settings in Lightroom or Capture One or whatever, that is a culmination of that person's style, that is an absolute steal, in my opinion. Like, that's something that person, that photographer, has probably worked on for years. Don't get me wrong, I've flipped back and forth on presets a lot in the last couple of years because it seems that for a lot of people online, it's just a bit of a cash grab. What's the quickest thing they can do to make money online in this sort of photography space? And I think there are a lot of bad presets out there. But if you have a creator, and I'm not just saying this because, eventually I'll be hopefully making a set of presets myself, but I promise I'm not saying it for that reason. If there's a creator that you really like what they do, it's like, what's the saying, picking up someone's skirt. It's like seeing behind the curtain of something that someone wouldn't normally show you. And, for not that much money, it just seems like a no-brainer. If someone's going to give you, to be honest, I think giving a big library of presets actually is the opposite of valuable. You know, some of these preset packs have like 50, 100 different presets. That is so not useful. And in my opinion, you're going to go back to 2, maybe 3 different looks again and again and again. And how can you have a style that consists of 50 or 100 different looks? To me, that means those looks don't apply to a lot of different images or can't be changed for a lot of different images. And it's just spray and pray. Quantity does not equal quality. But yeah, sorry, I'm really not articulating this point very well. What I'm saying is, if someone has taken a number of months or years to culminate their style and their edits into a small series of presets that you can literally just plug into your computer and then go through and find how they've achieved different elements of that image, that is an absolute no-brainer. And I've done it to a few creators recently just to learn from them. It is an invaluable learning tool. And to be honest, I very often don't end up using those presets ever again after that first time looking at them. But the learning that you get from it is just so worth the price of admission. So yeah, that's a really easy one. All right, I think I'm going to leave it there for that episode. But thank you again once more for sticking it out through to the end. I haven't decided, but I likely am not going to upload a main video next week. I might upload something very short. I might just do a podcast. I really want to finish the year out strong with the podcast, although it's been getting very difficult the last few weeks to find content, to find solo content to talk about as we come up on a year. I think this is the 50th episode. So yeah, I think I may take a week off videos in general next week because I have some other projects that I want to work on that I think could help me take the channel to the next level. Just things that I can't do when I'm in this constant hamster wheel, because at the moment I'm basically working 2 full-time jobs plus, you know, trying to support Jem and raise a little man. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Anyway, you'll see in the next week if you are a follower of the channel. If not, you don't care anyway, and you're probably not listening to this point. So once again, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you learned something, the best way you can support me is by leaving a thumbs up on the video, a thoughtful comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.